I just noticed that my little thing of gum I left up here all week. Do you think it would be good to chew this again? Of course, if I put it in my pocket, then I'll forget it's in there and get washed. I don't know what to do, but I don't want to leave trash in there. It's not good. So, you might remember that our vision, our mission as a church is to make and mature disciples of Jesus Christ. And we believe that as that happens, people will be transformed, we'll be transformed, the world will be transformed. It'll be more reflective of this kingdom that Jesus brought in himself. When he came, he brought the kingdom of heaven, which is an amazing thing because we look around and we say, wow, this doesn't seem very kingdom-like, but Jesus is our king. And that's what we say, Jesus is our king. And when you look at this vision, this is how we believe God is calling us in this time to live out that mission. To do it by loving like Jesus, learning his ways, and leading by his example. So when we love like Jesus, it's about building relationships. It's about our relationship with God, who loves us, about growing that and deepening that, doing our part in that, and allowing the Lord to do his part in that. And also, it's about how we love each other people who believe, as we do. But not only that, it's about how we love people who don't know that God loves them, who don't know Jesus. And I think this passage, the story of the prodigal, is one of those passages that as we continue to journey for the next couple of weeks around this, it will help us to know what it means to love like Jesus. Okay? So kind of keep that in your mind. We're in a little tutorial here. But I want to start with remembering a story about what happened when I was a little kid. One day, we lived, and I think maybe some of you heard me say this, when I was little, we lived way out. We lived down the hills, and, we had the party line. Our neighbor, Virginia, we could hear her breathing on the phone when we had a conversation. Back in the days when you did that kind of thing, Virginia, please hang up the phone, things like that. We lived down the hills. And so there wasn't anybody else around, and we lived on the side of a hill. I think everybody lived on the side of a hill, or you lived in the valley, which is where the roads were. So anyway, on the side of the hill, I remember this period of time, we had apparently tremendous rains. We not only had grass, we had a lot of dirt. And you know what happens when it rains? Dirt becomes mud. Very good. Well, one day, I was feeling full of myself. And I think the reason I was feeling full of myself is because I had strapped on my actually they were plastic-handled 6-shooters. All right? I had my belt on, and I had my holsters, I had my guns in there, and I'm out to do business, I'm taking care of something, I don't know what. But anyway, not only did I have my 6-shooters on, but I had my cowboy boots on. And they were sweet. They were like black and red. It was sweet. So I was out on a mission. There was nobody else around, so I had all this imaginary people around me. On a mission. And I'm thinking, probably, that my dad and mom said to me, now Tom, there's a lot of mud out there. I want you to stay out. But of course I was on a mission. And you don't, a guy with 2 6-shooter plastic-handled thing in cowboy boots can go anywhere, right? So I decided I was going to go through the mud up the side of the hill. Partway through it, I got stuck. My boots sank. In fact, my boots sank so deep, there's only about this much of my boots sticking up over the mud. I kid you not. I am not exaggerating. So I did what every cowboy with his 6-shooters and his cowboy boots does when he gets in such a situation. I said, help! Thankfully, I don't know how I got help. I'm a little suspicious that maybe my sister didn't go get help for me, but I bet she did. She and I used to go out a little bit, but she probably went home, and my dad came, and he grabbed a hold of me, and he lifted me out of my boots. Because he couldn't get the boots out. But he pulled me out pulled me out of my boots. I remember that. It's one of those things you don't tend to forget. But I think it's a great metaphor, a great image of what can happen in life. Sometimes we get stuck. You ever been stuck? And sometimes we're literally stuck. You've probably been stuck in the snow a couple times here. But sometimes we're stuck in other ways. And we don't know how we're going to get out. And we wonder, maybe you're feeling stuck right now. Maybe it's not mud, but maybe it's something else. I think about this younger son in the story, and I think the younger son was feeling just a bit stuck. So remember, if you will, just kind of back up, rewind a little bit. We talked last Sunday about the setting, the story that makes all this make sense to us is the story of God creating us. And so the beginning of your Bible, very front page, Old Testament, Genesis 1, we hear the story in Genesis 1 about God creating us. And you might remember that in the whole story, God creates things, calls them good, and then when he gets to human beings, creates us, and it says that we have been made very good. You have been made very good. What happened, though, is, next chapter, Genesis 3, we hear the story about how human beings decided that they're not sure they can trust God. They're not really thinking that God necessarily has their best interest in mind. They begin to doubt. They eat the apple. They rebel. And they get sent out east of Eden, out of paradise. And we've been living with the effects of that ever since. That's part of the backdrop, if you will, for this story that we're hearing today about this prodigal. Now the good news is, and there's a lot of good news and all the bad news, and the good news is that God did not leave it there. God did not leave us stuck in the mud. But God had a plan. There was this guy named Abraham, and Abraham came along, and it says in the Bible that, in Genesis, that Abraham was a man of faith, and because he was a man of faith, it was accounted to him as righteousness. In other words, he was right with God because he had faith, not because he was perfect. Because if you read the story of Abraham, and some of the shenanigans that went on, you're saying, no, this dude was not perfect. He wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm guessing you're not perfect. But the good news is that we can be right with God through faith. And because of that, God made a binding promise. In the Bible language, we call that a covenant with humanity, with Abraham. And it sounds like this. This is from Genesis 17, all right? Listen to this. This is my covenant with you. I will make you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you extremely fruitful. Your descendants will become many nations. Kings will be among them. I will confirm my covenant, my binding promise with you and your descendants after you from generation to generation. This is the everlasting covenant. I will always be your God and the God of your descendants after you. Now the great thing is that this is open, this covenant is offered to everybody who has faith in God through Christ. Everybody can be in on this promise. And that is such good news. Because here's the thing. We keep messing up, right? We keep getting stuck, right? I mean, as humanity we do, but even individually, we get into what I would say at times, a pickle. And we don't know what to do. But God knows that about us. And God does things to make it right. So Abraham was right with God through faith. This covenant was made. And God remembered that covenant many years later when God's people were stuck in Egypt as slaves. You've probably seen this portrayed on movies on the big screen. All right? The people of Israel enslaved in Egypt. They cry out. They want freedom. They want relief. They want to be able to worship God. They are in misery. And here's what it says in Exodus. This is awesome. It says this, Exodus 2. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. And what did God know? God knew it was time to act. God knew that his people needed saved. God knew his people were stuck, that they were buried, that they were mired, and they could not get out by themselves. So rather than leave them enslaved, no, God remembered his covenant. And he still is. So God has made this binding promise with humanity, and that's part of the backdrop of this story. Now you remember there was a man who had two sons, and David read for us a little bit about the first son, but I want to complete the passage so that we get reminded about this other son as well. Listen to this. His son said to him, the younger son, Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But his father said to his servants, Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger, sandals for his feet, kill the calf we've been fattening, we're going to celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now is found. So the party began. Now, I think it's cool that there are parties in the Bible. All right, so there's a party. Now, meanwhile, the older son was in the fields and he was working. All right, he was doing what he was supposed to be doing, at least as he understood it. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. Your brother's back, he was told. Your father's killed the fattened calf. We're celebrating because of his safe return. But the older brother was angry, and he wouldn't go in. And his father came out and he begged him, but he replied, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to do. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. And his father said, listen to this. His father says to him, look, dear son, you've always stayed by me. And everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. I love the line that David read earlier, talking about the younger son, when it says in verse 17, when he finally came to his senses. To me, what that says is, when the younger son remembered. He remembered. He remembered the character of the father whom he had insulted, whom he basically had said, I wish you were dead. He remembered that that father let him go on the journey. He remembered that that father, as imperfect as his son was, loved him still. There was something that began to tug in him in the middle of his stuckness, where he said, there is something better for me. I don't want to be stuck anymore. I am tired of playing this game. I want free. And what helped him to be free was that he remembered. He remembered the character of his father. Now in the Bible, remembering is a big deal. Whenever it says that people do not remember God, it brings trouble. If you read in the Bible, and it will say that the people forgot God every time there's trouble. We bring trouble when we don't remember God. But whenever it says in the Bible that God remembered, it signals that God's about to do something amazing. That God's going to work to create and to make a change. That God, in fact, is probably going to work a miracle. And you see, I read this passage and I think about it. I think that this younger son remembered. There was something primordial in him. We're going to call it prevenient grace. Remember, we've talked about that before. That grace that goes before us. That grace of God that reaches out to us even when we don't know there's a God. And it's that prevenient grace that was working this young man's life. I think it told him deep within that he didn't have to stay stuck, that he could be free because there was a God who loved him, that was waiting for him no matter what he had done. He remembered the character of the Father. And the good news is the Father remembered his Son. Forever. He remembered his Son. So how do we remember something that we've not experienced? I know that for some of us, the image we have of a parent, of a mother or a father may not be so good. And just with the way we are as humans, that sometimes gets involved in how we perceive God. And we kind of try to sort that out. You know, how can I have this picture of a God as a parent when I've had a bad experience? I just want you to know that the Lord will heal that. That there is this perfect God, this perfect Father who loves you. And I invite you to claim that for yourself, to claim that you are beloved of that perfect Father. But my question is, how, if you've never experienced that, how can you know that God loves you if it were not for the fact, and I believe it's a fact, that God has wired in you this inborn, innate longing for Him? There's something in us that enables us to remember, even one perhaps in whom we have not believed before. This son had an experience of a loving father, that even though he was maybe angry with the father, even though he was caught up in things he shouldn't have been caught up in, there was something inside him that spoke to his mind and his heart and said, son, you can go home. You can come home. You can be unstuck. You can be set free. I think about that older son in the story and about him remembering. And frankly, he's, as we talked about last time, he's as rebellious as the younger son. I think that the only thing the older son can remember is what he has done for his dad and remember what his dad hasn't done for him. So he's got stuff to work through too. But the character of the God, the Father, is that He treasured both of His sons. And that same God treasures you. I want you to hear that. Whatever you are stuck in, the character of this holy God is to love you and to receive you and to remember you. So my question today, amongst many, is will you remember? But not only will you remember, will you do as the younger son did and begin the journey home? Will you remember the loving Father who led you home? And will you remember the loving Father and make your way home? I remember our address where I started out and left my boots was Route 1, Senecaville, Ohio. Back in the day, when you could just put your name and Route 1, Senecaville, Ohio, and your mail would get to you. Since then, I think they've got a number, and it's got a different road name and all this. But I remember when we moved, I didn't want to move, and we ended up at 424 North 15th Street, Cambridge, Ohio. And I remembered that having to deal with that relocation and everything, I didn't like moving, and isn't it ironic that here I am, an itinerant preacher who has lived in more places than you probably would want to know. But I've realized something. And that is that even though my boots are probably still buried at Route 1, Senecaville, Ohio, that is not my home. And even though I lived for a while at 424 North 15th Street, Cambridge, Ohio, that is not my home. And even though I lived for the longest period of my life at 1190 Mount Zion Road, Bucyrus, Ohio, that's not my home. And even though I have lived in Galion, Ohio, and now live in Painesville Township, that this is not my home, because I remember that my true home is with the Lord who invites me, who is waiting for me to let go of my stuckness, to allow Him to pull me up and to send me home. And His home is right here in His arms, waiting for me. And He's waiting for you. You don't have to stay stuck in the pigsty, starving. Because hope, love, invites you to remember and be free. So I'm going to ask Pam to come. And as she plays a little bit, I want to read for you a a song, part of it anyway, that speaks to my heart. And I want you to reflect on this in the interim between now and in a few moments. The band's going to come up and we're going to share communion. But I want you to hear this with me. It says this, listen to these words. O Lord, I give my life to you. O Lord, I give my life to you. I trust in you, my God. Do not let me be disgraced, or let my enemies rejoice in my defeat. No one who trusts in you will ever be disgraced, but disgrace comes to those who try to deceive others. Show me the right path, O Lord. Point out the road for me to follow. Lead me by your truth and teach me, for you are the God who saves me. All day long I put my hope in you. Remember, O Lord, your compassion and unfailing love, which you have shown from long ages past. Do not remember the rebellious sins of my youth. Remember me in the light of your unfailing love, for you are merciful, O Lord. The Lord is good and does what is right. He shows the proper path to those who go astray. He leads the humble in doing right, teaching them his way. The Lord leads with unfailing love and faithfulness all who keep his covenant and obey his demands. For the honor of your name, O Lord, forgive my many, many sins. Who are those who fear the Lord? He will show them the path they should choose. He will show them the path they will choose. Turn to me and have mercy, for I'm alone and in deep distress. My problems go from bad to worse. Oh, save me from them all. Feel my pain and see my trouble. Forgive all my sins. See how many enemies I have and how viciously they hate me. Protect me. Rescue my life from them. Do not let me be disgraced, for in you I take refuge. May integrity and honesty protect me, for I put my hope in you. That's in the Bible. How awesome is that?